Hi, today we're going to make some feathers that you can use for all different kinds of decorating, that you can use to hang from your dream catchers or anything else that you want. You can make them big like this, or you can make them smaller, and I'll show you how to adjust the size after I teach you the basic technique, okay? So first thing we're going to do is we're going to decide about how long we want the center part of our feather to be, okay? I decided that I wanted mine to be, about this long, okay? And you can make it any length you want. So then what we're going to do is you're going to take 3 pieces of yarn, okay? You're going to cut them the length you want them. You're going to tie one end in a knot, really close, as close to the end as you can get it, without slipping off the end. And then you're just going to braid this into a simple braid. I'm not going to make you watch how I braid. If you don't know how to braid, there's lots of tutorials on how to do that. Okay, so I'll be back in a minute once I have it all braided. If you clamp the knot of your yarn onto a binder clip and clamp it onto a notebook or something, it makes braiding much easier, and it'll make it easier a little bit later on because we're going to use something similar to that. So then that's all you have to do, is you're just going to braid your yarn. Kind of get it as tight of a braid as you can. The tighter you make your braid, the thinner the center bit of your feather will be, and the easier it'll be to do the rest of it. Okay, you're going to braid it down till you get to, I don't know, maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches from the end, and then you're just going to we're just going to clamp it off. So I'm going to take my other clip that I have here, and I'm just going to put it over. I'm going to slide this over a little bit to the edge, and then I'm going to clamp it off just like that, down so that it clamps past where the end of your braid is. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut the pieces of yarn for our feathers. Okay, now the interesting thing is that all the pieces of yarn for this are exactly the same length. What I did was I took a piece of cardstock and I made it about half as wide as I wanted my yarn to be. It's about 3 inches wide. Okay, so then when you're done, your yarn is going to be about 6 inches from end to end. So then what I did was I just took my yarn, hold it in place, and just wrap it around. And then bring it back down to wherever you started from. Take your scissors, cut off the extra yarn, and then cut your yarn in half. Just take it off from the card, and there you have your yarn. Okay, and do that with however many colors you want. I'm going to make mine with the 3 colors of blue because it matches the dream catcher that I made before. So I'm going to cut those, and what I did was I cut about 10 or 12 lengths of yarn in each one of the colors. Okay, so I'm going to cut my yarn, and then we'll come back and I'll show you what comes next. Okay, so once you have all your yarn cut, you're going to determine in which order you want your yarn to go onto your feathers. I wanted to make sure that when I got to the end of my feather, the color that I used as the base was also at the end, because you're going to have a few little stragglers there, so this hides them a little bit in the base of it. So I'll show you how to get started, and then I'll jump ahead, and then I'll show you how to end it. Okay, we're going to start with whatever color you start with. Now what you want to do is you want to make sure that you leave maybe 1/2 inch to 1 inch at the top of your feather, so that if you want to attach it to anything, you have enough space to do that with. So I'm going to leave a little bit of space. I'm going to slip my yarn underneath. I'm going to cross it, make sure it's as even as you can make it, and then I'm just going to make a simple slip knot. That's all, just one little slip knot. I'll show you again. You're just gonna snug this one right up next to the one that you had before. You're gonna cross them, put one over the other, slip it through, and pull. And that's all. You're just gonna keep doing that over and over again until you get down to just about at the end. You can change colors and however you want your feather to look, okay? So I'm going to show you a little bit of a speeded up version, and then I'll come back at the end, okay? Okay, so we're almost at the end, so I'm going to switch my colors back. There's the end of my braid. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to my greenish blue, and I'm just going to continue on. I'm going to put like 2 or 3 of these at the end. So I'm going to make sure I snug them right up against the color that was before them. There's one. Make sure you keep them out of the way so you don't accidentally tie them into your next one. There's 2. And here's 3. And you can end it with however many you want or whatever colors you want it to be, however you want your design to look. All right, so this is going to be my last one. I'm going to snug it right up against the one that's next to it. I'm going to pull it tight. And because it's the last one and I don't want them sliding off, which they shouldn't, but I don't want them to do that, so I'm going to just tie a double knot in this one. Okay, and there we go. And now we have our, it doesn't look anything like a feather, does it? But wait. Okay, so once you have that, you're going to take everything off from your clip. All right, and then we're going to get our aluminum foil, and then I'll show you what comes next. So the next part of what we're going to do is we're going to stiffen our feathers so that they stand up pretty well. They, you know, don't be all wobbly like this, because that doesn't quite look very feathery to you or me or whatever. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a container that it's okay to use and not use for anything else. So this is an old food container, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of water in the bottom, and then I'm going to add some white glue to it. Okay, we're going to add some white glue to that just to thin it out a little bit to make brushing a little bit easier. And then I'm going to take my paintbrush and I'm going to mix it around so that we mix the water and glue together well so that we don't have watery spots. Okay, and if it's a little too thick, you can always add a little bit more water. If it's a little too thin, you can always add a little bit more glue. Okay, now what I'm going to recommend is when you take your piece of foil, you want to put your feathers as close down to the bottom as you can, because you're going to do something that you're going to end up pulling it. So if it's too close to the edge, you'll pull it right off, and then you'll have to start over. Okay, so once we have the glue all mixed together, I'm going to take the brush and I'm just going to brush the glue onto the yarn. Okay, you really want to saturate the yarn so that it's very, very wet. An alternative is that you could just dip the whole thing in the container, which I did in one of the first ones. The problem is you end up wasting a lot of glue because once it's saturated, then it's going to come off and you're just going to waste it. So this way you can just brush the glue on. Whatever way you think is easier for you, try it either way. But having done it the other way, I found that this was a little bit easier. And just brush it on there really thick. And don't worry if they flip over. We're going to go through and we're going to straighten all the pieces of yarn out. For right now, you just want to make sure that you get enough glue on the yarn, okay? So we're just going to make sure that it's all saturated. And it is washable glue, which is a good thing, because if we get it on our hands, we're not going to get in trouble with Mom because we made a mess. Doing it on the aluminum foil allows us to move it around a little bit. It's not going to stick to the foil when it's all done. It may stick a little bit, but it'll pop off pretty easy. So that'll be good. But it also makes cleanup a lot easier so that we're not making a mess in places that we're not supposed to make a mess. Now, one thing that you want to do is make sure you get all the way to the tips of your yarn so that the tips of your feather are nice and stiff. And when you're all done, you're going to put some glue on this part. But for right now, because we're holding it there, we don't want to put glue on there because then we'll just have glue all over our fingers. Now that we have it very nicely glued, we're going to give it a little bit of a pull and watch what happens. Look at that. It goes together sort of like a feather shape. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the end of the paintbrush. I'm going to wipe it off a little bit so that I'm not handling the part that has glue on it. But then what you're going to do is you're just going to go through each one of the strands of yarn and just straighten them out a little bit. So you're going to go through each one of the strands of yarn, and if you look and you see that you maybe missed a spot with the glue, you're just going to go back and put a little bit more glue on there. And it doesn't matter if some of your bits are shorter. If you've ever noticed, feathers aren't perfect. We're just going to go along and we're just going to stretch out each one of the pieces of yarn so that they're not twisted on top of each other, so they lay nice. You can even use the handle and press them down. And when you're all done, if you find that you've got some spots that are way too short, you can always take a pair of scissors, which is what I'm going to show you in a little bit with the ones that are already dry. Now, this is going to take a while to dry because it is very wet. So you want to, once you set it, don't touch it. Trust me, I moved them a couple times and then I had to go back and do this part all over again, all the stretching and straightening, because if you try pick it up, if it's not completely dry, it will move and you will be sad. I was. Very frustrating. So you want to take your time and you want to straighten it out. And the ones that are here on the end, you're just going to pull them down a little bit. Now we're going to go to the other side and we're going to spread them all out. And don't worry if you get them out a little bit too far, because we can always give it a tug again to slide it so that they all curve together. Sometimes if the yarn is laying one on top of the other, that's why they're not getting the amount of glue that you want them to have. So by going through it, this way you make sure that you have enough glue on all the pieces that you want. kind of spread it out a little bit, so we're just going to give it a slight little pull back like this. Look at that, how nice they go together. And they bunched up a little bit here, so we're just going to give them a little bit of a straighten, a little bit of a smoosh with the brush. And you can even just use the end of the brush to point them in the direction you want them to go. Give them a little bit. See what I mean about because you're going to pull it. If you put it too close to the end, when you pull, you're going to pull it right off. So you don't want to do that. Okay, so once you have everything lined up where you want it, you've got it pulled into place, you've got it straightened out and smoothed as best you can. Because like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. Then you're going to take the glue that's left and you're going to give a good coating to the end of it here. Kind of keep it straight as much as you can because you don't want it to be crooked. You want to make sure that your feather is as straight as it can be as well. And like I said, it's going to take some time for the glue to dry. So what I did was I transferred mine onto the notebook that I had used on the foil. Here, I'll show you. So we're just going to take the aluminum foil with the feather on the aluminum foil. We're just going to slide the notebook. I don't know if you can see that. I'm sliding the notebook up underneath. And then you're just going to set it aside somewhere that it's not going to get touched or moved or damaged. Because if you pick it up before it's dry, you're going to, let's see if I can show you, because then I'll just have to go back and fix it. Oh, see, that one didn't see. Then when you go to lay it back down again, you get the bubbles and it doesn't lay nice, and then you have to go back and fix it all again. So you don't want to have that happen. It's going to take twice as long. So once you set it, leave it set, come back to it tomorrow, and then you'll be happy with it. Okay, so I'm going to let this sit and dry, and then I'm going to show you how to trim it, and then I'll show you some alternatives. Okay, alrighty. So once your feathers are completely dry and nice and stiff, you want to take a pair of scissors and you're just going to give them a little bit of a trim. See, then you've got the nicely trimmed feathers. And next I'll show you how to do an alternative to the big yarn feathers. So one of the alternatives that you can use to using the yarn as a base is you can use embroidery floss. So what I did was I cut the pieces to about 8 inches long. I cut 6 of them and I braided it just like I did the initial yarn one, and then in order to make it a little bit more delicate, I cut my bits of embroidery floss into 4-inch pieces to tie them on. So we're going to do the same thing that we did before, where we're going to leave a bit of a gap at the end so that we have the stem of our feather, and then we're going to just tie it on. In order to make it a little bit easier, you can use you can tie on 2 pieces at a time, so it's not going to take forever. So you just put them over, wrap it through, give it a tie, give it a pull, and you're just going to keep doing that all the way down, just like we did before.